Alors bonsoir tout le monde,
Good
bienvenue
evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Standing Committee on Strategies and Public Policies. This evening, more specifically, we were going to be beginning the budget process with some presentations. We have three groups of local stars who are here this evening to present the budgets of three different external organizations. I said three, but actually there are four. We're going to hear from the CRPA, Kodiak Regional Policing Authority, Transigua, Kodiak Transport, and Expansion Dieppe. Without any further ado, then, the City of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship that the Mi'kmaq co-developed and signed with the British Crown in the 18th century. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands or resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the parties. So our first and this evening are to open this session. Dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The first group this evening, the CRPA, Kodiak Regional Policing Authority, is going to present to Council.
Your Worship. Ça va bien aujourd'hui, monsieur?
vous-même.
How are you this evening? Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Je m'appelle Don Moore. Je suis le président de l'autorité policière régionale de Kodiak.
And I'm the chairman of the CRPA.
Regional Policing Authority. Let me first say that the Kodiak Regional Policing Authority strives to serve you and the communities that are part of the Kodiak region. And this year we've done a lot of work in engaging the residents and businesses and organizations of all three municipalities to come up with a set of priorities of policing and work that we can be able to present to you here this evening. Part of that will also then include a proposed budget, what we're looking for as far as not just next year, but a bit of a long-term view, a long-term plan, so that we can move forward and be more successful from a safety and security perspective in our community. So I'll go over a little bit of our strategic plan, some of the options that we debated as a CRPA. I have with me here this evening the Vice Chair of the CRPA, Nagesh Jamala, and also some colleagues from the actual Kodiak Regional Police as well. And we'll finalize with our specific recommendation based on some different options that have been given to you. The slide deck that we do have in front of you here, we've been making modifications over the last couple of weeks, and you're going to get some additional information in the coming days, but we'll go through some of that information and what is a little bit different than what you're seeing here this evening. So the CRPA engaged back early this year an exercise to get as much community engagement as possible to put together one of the two legislated responsibilities of the Kodiak Regional Policing Authority. So we only have two specific responsibilities as a policing authority. Number one, develop the priorities of policing. Number two, put together a detailed budget to match those priorities of policing. With both of those, we have committees, and as a board, we measure the success throughout the year and to see how we're doing with respect to such. We had meetings with 80 different community groups, organizations in 2022. We also received several hundred emails and responses to a survey that we had put out to gather this information so that we had something that was fully concrete. The terms and conditions for the CRPA is laid out by your memorandum of understanding for how the CRPA is to operate. So the agreement you have with Moncton and Dieppe actually specifically states that we are to get engagement from our communities. Am I doing something wrong, or am I just...
Moncton, Dieppe, and Riverview.
Moncton,
I
Dieppe.
wouldn't want to leave out our
Dieppe
friends.
goes first. Oh, sorry, Dieppe, Moncton, and Riverview. So I'll say it that way.
DMR. Yeah.
DMR. We'll say
Famous hockey league locally.
This is true, yes. So Dieppe, Moncton, and Riverview. I apologize. Thank you. With that, we had some common themes that came out of all of the information that we gathered, and it's hundreds of pages of stuff. We condensed it down to a 30-some page report that you were given back in August. It basically said that the community, all 3 municipalities, are looking for more community policing. I had said to you guys in a bit of a joke several months ago that if I asked 11 different people, if I asked 10 people what does community policing means, I'm going to get at least 14 different answers. But people were asking for more community policing. People want, in all 3 communities, more policing to do with traffic issues, speeders, people going through stop signs, loud mufflers, and so on. So people want more traffic police officers, and also more police officers dealing with drug crimes and property theft as well. In putting this together, we've actually made a recommendation that would increase the police force by 25 regular members and 14 civilian support roles. Those support roles are 911 operators, court personnel, analysts, I'm forgetting some of the other ones. Internal investigation people, non-police officer type roles, 14 civilian type roles. The 25 police officer roles, we had put it together so that 10 of them would be dedicated to a community policing unit, 10 of them for a dedicated traffic unit, and 5 to be dealing with property crime and drug. In addition to what the Kodiak Regional Policing, our Kodiak Regional Police Force already does today. There was also an additional program that we want to put in place, a program that has been quite successful in other municipal police forces, including its use within the RCMP in Western Canada, to have a support structure so that the RCMP members would be able to have access to a service that when they're on a safety and security call, that if there is a social issue that needs to be dealt with at the same time, that they would have access to the right resources to be able to get, if we could use the word, the client onto the right thing. Once the police officer deals with the safety and security, that the people are also dealt with from another aspect as well. So we're not actually asking for any additional money for social services. It's for policing to be able to know and understand and be able to have a better structure so that they can do their job better, so to pass off to the right social service as well. So from that perspective, at this point, I'm going to pass it over to my vice chair. So Nagesh, if you could highlight some of the details of the budget, please.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you very much, Your Worship and councillors. For you, we have presented 3 different options. Option 1 is implementing all the 25 officers and 14 municipal or civilian employees in year 1. This is the request we're looking at. I'll show you the dollars later on the slides. Option 2 is same 25 officers spread differently. One correction I would like to make on this presentation is here we quoted 8 RCMP officers in year 1 and 8 in 2 and 9 in year 3. What we are changing is actually in year 1, we're asking for 5 RCMP officers, 10 and 10, same 25 officers spread differently than what was presented here. And similarly, the municipal employees will be 3 4 and 7. That will not change significantly. The last iteration is same 25 officers spread over 5 years, five equally among the 5 years, and civilian employees 3 all across the board. The cost of the implementation would be is on this slide. We are requesting two cost increases for next year. One is a base upgrade. This is cost normally required to operate the RCMP officers. We need to grant them pay increases based on the contract that we signed with our RCMP services. As usual, everybody knows fuel costs are going up significantly year over year. That's part of the cost, and equipment, additional cars to service the additional 5 officers or regular members to replace them. The cost of $1.3 million. Indirect costs related to pension, dividend, extra, all those costs of $400,000, and other expenses, which are normal cost increases. So, and on the civilian side, we are looking at pay increases, and we have a downtown office going forward on the main street in Moncton. That's cost that one. Versa term dispatch system, that's a full year implementation cost of that, $184,000. The last one is $340,000 base year upgrade. That's related, a base budget upgrade is related to the risk managers for total increase of $3.8 million, 10% increase year over year on the base budget. In addition to that one, we're asking for the implementation of 5 officers and 3 municipal employees and the related cost to them of $1.9 million, which is an additional 5% increase year over year. One other point I want to make, the additional cost is the $400,000 in year 1. This is more related to the outreach program, where we can get the required counselors to help with the mental health issues or homeless issues or other issues that the RCMP is not equipped to deal with. However, they need to go to the call to service that call. Total cost we're asking for is $3.8 million for base budget, additional strategic plan for the 5 officers and 3 municipal employees, plus the related cost of 1.9. Total increase is 5.7 million, which is 15% increase year over year. And last point I want to make is costs are increasing $5.7 million. In 2022, we asked for a one-time budget increase for cell mitigation of $1.5 million. We're not asking for that anymore. That's a reduction for next year. So next increase is total budget of $43.8 million for 10.7% increase year over year. That's it, my presentation, Your Worship.
Merci. Question de la part des membres du Conseil.
Thank you. Any questions by councillors?
I see une question.
Is there a question? Councillor Leboutier.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. First of all, I would like to go back. I believe it was 2019 when we started the process of revising and what was the vision that we wanted to and there was a lot of we've increased the capacity. Well, we've increased at the employee at that stage. Was it 2019 or 2018? Anyway, between those 2 years, my question is, how close were we at that time to the projection and the cost that was estimate to what was the real thing? Because now it's nice that we're looking at increasing the float, but how close are we to those estimates? That's kind of where I want to go back to the 3.8. Is it going to be 3.8 or is it going to be 4 or 5 million at the end? When we're going to look back in 5 years from now, that the 10% increase is not a 10% increase, but it's an increment of 25. That's
At that time, what we presented is lower than the 10% increase. The biggest increase is related to the RCMP contract. We didn't know what the increase happening in related to the RCMP contract. In our projections, we made 2.5% as the increase that we don't know better, but that's what we've been using all along. That's the projection we use. plus other cost increases that are happening in 23 are related to what's happening around us in terms of inflation, the fuel cost, the equipment cost, that is increasing significantly, which is driving that. If it had been a normal year, probably that 10% would have been somewhere. Again, I'm speculating, it's not the right way to do it. It would have been more like a 5% increase. But again, it would be very hard to speculate.
Just wanna add something. So one thing I want to make clear though is we're recommending a 3-year plan, a 3-year implementation of an increase to our police force. That's our recommendation as a CRPA. The first year right now, because of a number of reasons, but including the base budget increase because of inflation and so on, we are recommending that we go with 5 of the 25 officers in the first year, 3 of the civilian support personnel, and then increase it in the year 2024 and 2025. We will be able to have estimates in the next day or two on what those additional costs would be for 2024 and 2025. What I won't know though is what will the base increase be if there's any inflationary increase in 2024 and 2025. A year ago, we wouldn't have been able to predict 3.8 million as a base increase at this point. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Yeah, and I'm sure the financing, the treasury will look at and we work that with you. Do we have at the present time the capacity, do you have the capacity to receive such an increase of resources in a short period of time in terms of resource support and all of that?
I'm being told yes, is the simple answer. But we want to phase this in. Let's do a little bit the first year and then make sure we plan properly for it in year 2 and 3 of our plan.
Okay. And I have another question. I think for the community respond in the survey, I think it's awesome what you've done, and you have probably the good pulse of the tri-community. But when I look at, there's a difference between nice to have and must have, right? So, and we do have a board, and I'm hoping that that has been analyzed because there's a big impact on the community. And just by the city of Dieppe, it's over, I believe, 1.4 million this year of increase just for the community. So my question towards, with that increase of impact, how will we benefit, or are we going to receive more services for that within this community?
The short answer from the CRPA is yes. And that's our desire from the CRPA is we want more police officers on the streets. We want more police officers doing policing work, serving our community. From an operational perspective, I'm not sure if Superintendent, if you have anything to add to that, or just yes, we're going to be able to do this.
Donc, merci pour la question, conseillère Leboutillier. Donc,
Thank you for your question, Councillor. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, well, currently, if we have 40 to 50,000 service calls per year that the RCMP has to answer, that goes from simple calls such as my neighbor's dog is barking too much, to somebody has been killed. So I mean, and everything in between. What these extra numbers are going to give us is going to allow us to do everything from the lowest level of call to the highest. If we talk about visibility, the ability to investigate crimes against the person, crimes, the fight against drugs, and visibility, police visibility. We have to have a unit that is able to enforce the highway code every day, not just once a month. Currently, we have a unit that comes from the province. They call 2 days a month, if we're lucky, if they don't have other priorities, meanwhile, around the province. So what what we do between calls, when we have these 40 or 50,000 calls, we try to do all of the extra work that we need to do to ensure public safety, to make sure that people say, yes, I feel safe here in the community. So the 25 police officers, I mean, we have a base. The base would be 10 people for a highway traffic unit, 10 for community police unit. And we've already signed police officers to each of the high schools in the Moncton area. They're not there physically all day long every day, but it is a presence that is greater than it used to be. I mean, we know there are 37 schools in the Moncton Riverview Dieppe area. So currently, we can't be visible in all of these areas where, I mean, our youth are our greatest wealth. And I'd like to be able to send a unit to every school every morning, every lunchtime, every day. I mean, but it's impossible. I'd need hundreds of police officers to do that. So with these 25 that spread out over 3 years, slowly but surely, that will help address all of these problems. But it will also, we will have a plan to get outcomes. We don't want to send 25 people out on the street and say, um, well, what are we going to do with them? We know where we want to place them, and that's we want to align that to our plan. Now, to your prior question on whether we have the capacity or not, yes, we do have the capacity. It's a little more complicated if we say, okay, we need 25 people next year. No. Well, first of all, where are we going to find those 25 people? The Depot and Regina, everybody wants officers coming out of there. The other provinces are not ready to let go of their experienced officers either. So if we say, well, five next year, five isn't a problem. So, and then 10 the following year and 10 the following year, no problem there. If we do decide that now for then. Now, and we'll find a place in our old building. We'll be strategic. And if we have to organize our shifts differently, or if we have to organize satellite patrols, for example, and say, okay, you five, you're going to spend all day in the Dieppe area doing uh, road checks. Well, we'll do that. And if we have to place cars in parking lots, we'll do that because the budget doesn't include just the 25 officers, it includes their equipment, their vehicles, and so on. So we have a plan for that. And it'll be up to me and Inspector Farah to determine how we're going to deliver results. So we'll see how that goes. And if it's not approved, well, we're going to continue to do the work that we're doing every day and that we're doing well every day. But that whole proactive part, the extra, we're going to do that as we can. And right now we're moving forward. We're but we're just afraid that we can't do what everybody wants. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? I see no further questions. So thank you for your presentation.
I'd like to thank Councillor Jean-Marc Rideau and resident Robert Arsenault for their service that they had on the Kodiak Regional Policing Authority. We also thank you for your recent appointments from Dieppe, Councillor Corinne Godbout, who has been baptized into us quite quickly, and we appreciate the work she's already been doing with us, and also Dieppe resident Benoit Boland as well. So thank you very much.
Merci bien.
Merci.
Alors, prochain item.
So next item, thank you to all of you. So, Madam Inspector, it's always a pleasure to receive you here at our place. Yes, certainly, certainly. That too, I forgot to say that. I was a little too shy about that. Okay, so now we are receiving the team of TransAqua with Sharon Doucette and Jean-Pierre Ouellet.
J'utilise les flèches là. Ou si je peux prendre là. Parfait. OK, merci. Bonsoir à votre honneur, cher conseiller.
Hello, Your Worship and councillors. I am Jean-Pierre Ouellet, and the Commissioner at the Transaqua Board of Directors. I'm here to present our budget for next year, and I'd like to recognize as well in the room Kevin Rice, who's our General Manager, Sharon Doucette, our Accounting Director, and a new Commissioner who started with us, Victor Cormier. Victor is already working and discussing things with us, and he's a great presence here. I want to thank the town of Dieppe for that. As well, I was also appointed by Dieppe in 2019, so I'd like to thank you for your trust. So we're going to talk about the 2023 budget, talk about a bit about governance at the board of directors, and also say that Michel, our chairman, couldn't make it tonight. Therefore, I will be making the presentation. So we'll start by talking about the first two points, the vision statements, but also the budget priorities, but also Sharon will present the draft operating budget. It comes, and also for the capital side, the draft capital side as well for Transaqua. So the mission is to collect and treat wastewater in a reliable, cost-efficient, and environmentally responsible manner. We want to make sure that water that is sent into our environment is better than when it came to us. That's our job. And the additions to infrastructure over the past few years that we'll discuss later shows that that is indeed what we're doing at Transaqua, that we are cleaning the water before it's sent back into the environment. And the Petitcodiac River will be in a much better condition thanks to that. The vision is to be an outstanding environmental steward, supporting regional planning, economic development, and quality of life for the communities of Dieppe, Moncton, and Riverview. We'll put Dieppe in front, just because I can. It's important at Transaqua that we can follow the growth of the metropolitan area. We are the fastest growing area in New Brunswick, perhaps even the Maritimes, and it's important for us to serve the community. We know that we have the infrastructure to do it, and we know we can do it, and we can do it reliably. So the priorities for 2023. We want to ensure cost-effective and sustainable delivery of services while ensuring an appropriate unit rate for 2023. We froze for the next year at $2,010 per unit, and that's the same rate as since 2016, even after having had a $90 million investment. We can look at any type of major project in the province, and I don't think you'll find many of them that are that big at $90 million that was able to be completed under budget. I think we did great work in order to provide that great service. Now we're continuing to work on a strategy for the energy management strategy. I'm sure that if you've watched over the past few weeks, we know that the energy costs will continue to go up, and also it has an effect on all management at Transaqua. Maybe we should invest on something that is perhaps more energy efficient rather than waiting for the future replacement of a unit. And of course, we want to put into place the strategy that we want to work quite a bit on this. And finally, we're starting to work on that with the municipalities. And we see that there are things that are going to happen when it comes to that. It's important to include that with our strategy, implementing recommendations from the regional wastewater and combined sewer proposed strategy. Also, there's also a lot of waste that is not wastewater that come to Trans Aqua. We want to continue engaging our stakeholders, right, to make sure that we can pass it through the process with as minimal an impact as possible. Where like oil, grease, pieces of wood, all sorts of things come through and can damage the equipment, and it drives up costs. So it's important to work with the public to be able to manage those things. Last year, there had been an oil spill. We talked about it in the media, and the public felt that. And we got lots of comments, and we were asked how those things happen and what we can do about them. And it's important to talk about these things with the public. So we have to know what can be thrown out or can be thrown with wastewater and what shouldn't be. Also, composting costs have gone up 42% due to increased production of biosolids. One of the things that happened when we had the Transaqua project to add to cleaning these solids is that we had more. This is, uh, I mean, water is clear when it goes out, but if we make the water cleaner, I mean, all the waste has to go somewhere. It becomes biosolid, and it's gotten to the point where we have to manage it, and it's not something that costs nothing. No, it costs something to manage that biosolid. As well, we have additional capital projects for the compost facility for 2023. So we have to invest money into that, and Sharon will be presenting that soon enough. Now we'll ask Sharon to make her presentation, and then we can answer questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I haven't used this before, so do I just move down? Okay, so a couple weeks ago, we met with the CFOs from the 3 municipalities, and we provided our budget financial statements and our 2022 business plan. So we provided that and had a discussion. So this slide right here is a representation of our 2023 budget, and it shows out to 2026. The revenue is showing the 210 rate, and expenses, as discussed with others, there is inflation built into the expenses. So this is what our projected annual surplus looks like going forward. So our revenue breakdown. The green represents, we wanted to demonstrate how it's broken down to visually show the residential units. The rate right now for residential units, it had increased this year by 2,714 equivalent units. Some of the factors for that was increase in development and meter consumption. That equated to about $570,000 increase in residential units. This year, you also see a larger increase for revenue interest. We had invested $27 million in GICs that yielded anywhere between 4.32 to 5.1%. So we don't get funding from FCM or a gas tax. So we're looking at other ways of trying to increase revenue outside of just the user fees. With that being said, with the project wrapping up, we're not receiving grant revenue anymore from Infrastructure Canada or Regional Development Corporation. So you see that decrease this year. So this slide here represents a breakdown roughly of how our expenses are kind of distributed. Some of the highlights for 2023, electricity, our UV building isn't currently up and running. So the budget decrease, after we kind of our assumption changed. So from 2022's budget, we decreased 2023's budget by 74,000. Insurance is also going to decrease because where we don't have the need for the wrap-up insurance for the construction project, that comes out of the budget as well. Property taxes also decreased by $112,000. The anticipated assumption last year was the assessment would be higher on the buildings. So that's $112,000 that we don't have this year. Consulting has increased for professional fees for items such as human resources, communications, legal, and design for PAD 4. Biosolids is definitely something, as JP just mentioned, there's an increase to that. So with the increase in the biosolids, there's 17,000 is attributed to additional bark. And then there's a cost of trucking to an alternative site right now. So there's 272,000 built into the budget. Maintenance also is increasing 127,000 for dewatering chemicals because of the higher production and increase in biosolids. So our capital budget. This slide here, it was our draft 1 budget. So there's been some changes. We're getting ready to present draft 2 this Thursday to the commission. So some of the changes on this slide that you see, we have had an additional $3 million for our combined combined sewer overflow strategy that we didn't have in draft 1. So we've added that in. And also we had asset assessment, condition assessment for high risk assets. We added additional in. So this is going to shift a little bit when we go to our commission meeting this week. So, but this gives a clear idea of how we're breaking and what we're focusing on. So that's the focus there. These are the highlights from our capital budget. The conveyance system, we're looking at, this is everything that's related to getting the wastewater to the wastewater treatment facility. We're looking at increasing the security system to investigate requirements for internet connections or how we can get the data onto our SCADA server. So this might require additional infrastructure. And we also are going to be doing a recycled water project where that will reduce, I think it's in 2025, almost 50% of our potable water costs that we bring into the plant. We're looking at using that to recycle it back into the plant so we're not using potable drinking water for operations. The compost facility, as JP mentioned, we are looking at adding a pad 4. We're going to retrofit the concrete pad and the airlines for pad 1, and then we need to extend the walls on the pads to get the gore covers. That's the covers that covers the piles out of the compost facility. So we're going to be adding those 2 more pad covers. And then our operational replacement. This is a replacement of any of the assets that are at their end of their useful life. So we're doing an OTR, which is off the road, heavy spec trucks. We're looking at getting an electric van for a pilot project for our electrician. And then we're going to have a major focus on replacing assets identified in our asset management plan, such as a failure main pumping switch, transfer switch for backup power. So that's kind of the focus of our 2023 budget, some of the highlights. This slide here is our 15-year asset replacement forecast. So this is what we're looking at by category over the next 15 years and how we're looking at distributing our funds and our focus to make sure that we can be sustainable and be fiscally responsible and make sure that we can cover our costs without having to borrow. So that's the end of my. Any questions?
Question de la part des membres du Conseil.
Questions from members of council? Mrs. Leboutillier, Councilor Leboutillier. Yes, thank you.
Go back to some of the numbers that you presented, and I tried to I'm gonna go back to today's presentation, try to go to your last year presentation because there was more the numbers, and this year we don't have numbers, we only have. So I'm trying to figure out what's the accumulated surplus that you have at the present time in 2000, or you're gonna have at the end of the fiscal year.
Accumulated surplus. Overall, it's 143 million, like our total assets. Right now we have 35 million in cash. 27 million is locked into GICs. So I know, like, this is I've been in the role for 10 months, so last year's budget's a little out of my realm, but Kevin? 4 million. Well, 4 million for 2023. Oh, sorry. Our budget is, our budget last year had a surplus of 6,037,000. And we're coming in right now, our current forecast is that we'll be under budget, our surplus by 1 million.
Also, on the presentation, you don't put numbers, but you have a percentage of 24.89% for amortization. What's that real number?
3,618,000.
Excuse me?
3,618,000.
So 3 million.
Yep.
So you anticipate for year to come,
Mhm.
if I'm right there, approximately 4 million of
It's
profit.
3.8 million.
Well, okay.
Yep.
Round it up, 4 million.
Mhm.
You have an amortization of, you just said, close to the same thing,
Mhm.
0.8. And we have an accumulated surplus of 27, and you're anticipating 35 in the next 5 years of 35 million point 7 capacity on your capital budget.
Mhm.
When I look at those numbers, like, I'm even surprised, like this year, that we're not looking at a reduction of that unit, because there's more money there, and your long-term forecast generates enough surplus, more to compensate for even the rest year of the. So could you elaborate more on that? Like, why are we still using that 210 when you have accumulated such a surplus already?
Merci de votre question, conseillère Boutillier. La réponse est en gros.
Thank you for your question. And the answer is that we still have a lot of unknowns when it comes to the processes, the changes of processes. For example, when it comes to biosolids, we have to bring them outside the province for now because we can't place them at our recycling, or we can't send to Eco 360 because there's no place there. So that's a cost we didn't anticipate. Now we have to find solutions to that. And that costs money. So there are uncertainties there, and there will be capital investments to make. And as well, there will be replacements when it comes to asset management that we have to predict for the long-term future. So what we could certainly bring the rates down for 1 year or 2 years, but then we would have to bring it back up and even go higher just to catch up, because we know that everything is costing more. And rather than having this roller coaster of rates, let's keep a stable rate. We can take that money, invest it into the future in a stable way. We have stability. We have the same rate since 2016, all right? And we are looking at long term, that we should not have to change that rate in the long term too much. So it's important to have stability when it comes to building the public. And that's what we're looking at as a commission. We want to make sure we have something that works in the long term. Okay, one more question. And since you're already looking at that, I would like the committee, the bill, rather the council, to look at what the cap should be when it comes to a surplus. I mean, what should 25 million could be in the bank, but then from that point, start to bring the unit costs down. I don't have all, I don't know if we could bring it down, I don't know, $5 per unity per unit, but I think that if we have a 27 point something million, I mean, I know there are uncertainties, but at some point there are costs, and the citizens, with all the costs going up, I mean, I would like to see at least a sort of cap, and that anything beyond the cap, maybe there could be a way of attenuating things. Well, thank you for your comment. I will certainly bring this to the board of directors. But another point I'd like to make is we have a tunnel going under the Petitcodiac River. Uh, and that's been there since the building of Transaqua. At some point, that was insured. At a certain point, the insurance company said that's no longer insurable. So, in our investments, we are we have an amount there to start construction just in case it becomes risky. We need that to operate, and to justify how much it would cost to replace it today, we don't have a very reliable number. There's a certain amount to be able to start work so that we don't have to wait too long, rather than taking an insurance policy that would be totally out, uh, which would be totally unbelievable. We want to start that 25 million. That 25 million is there for that. And I should have brought that point up earlier. Thank you.
Merci bien.
Thank you,
Monsieur Lantaigne.
Mr. Lantaigne.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. When you talk about unknown costs for biosolids, in your anticipated costs for 2023 and 2020 up to 26, are those costs not included there? But with the biosolid costs? Thank you for the question, Councillor Lantaigne. They are included in the budget. When we make changes, chemical or physical changes, there are always impacts. And we knew that we were going to have more biosolids, but 40% more, we weren't expecting that. So all the, not it, for Eco 360, we can't use them for composting. So because these are costs that hadn't been anticipated, we have to make changes to the walls as to where composting is made in order to maximize them as much as possible. And we probably have to see about doing composting elsewhere. And that's something that the board is looking at right now. And these are uncertainties, these are unknowns. And but we don't have a choice. We have to do it. It's like, I mean, if the biosolids come in, we have to put them somewhere. And the idea of trucking them elsewhere and bringing all of our waste somewhere, I mean, that's not something I would want to do. I wouldn't want neighbors to bring their garbage to my yard. So we have to take care of our waste. And that's what we want to do. And we want to continue doing that to make sure we have investments for that. Yes, I understand that. I think it would be important to have a study, an analysis to see what those costs could represent. I agree with Councillor Boutillier. This is great profits, and I mean, very good. Congratulations for such good management. And I agree that that's a lot of money being brought up. Could you come? I mean, it's hard to get a real idea, but at least find out what kind of cushion you need. I think with inflation and the increasing costs, I know that the rate stayed stable since 2016, but maybe we could improve things even more. So I'm in agreement to some degree with Councillor Leboutillier. That's my comment. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brideau. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lantaigne, certainly attack the question that I was going to ask, and I'm going to ask a question to the accountant. When you mentioned in the revenue that you have 28 million, I think I understood, that was invested in GICs. I mean, that's money, that's revenue that couldn't be used at the time, but was invested for the future, right?
So the 27 million, we invested the 20, sorry, I keep hearing myself. So
Can
the
be
27
confusing.
million, what we did, we didn't want it just sitting in the bank account and not earning interest that we could. So where the rates were so favorable this year, we were able to make $1.2 million over per year from now for 5 years. So this 27 million, we left 10 million in, or close to 8 million in our bank account for operations right now for the day-to-day stuff, and just have money there. But this money is locked away. Like JP said, there's money set aside specifically per our bylaw. We have to have money set aside for the tunnel. That's 5.4 million. We can't touch that unless we do that operation. But I also should mention asset replacement, the 30, almost 40 million. That's just asset replacement. That's not net new capital. So when we look at anything over and above outside of asset replacement, we're at $65 million that over the next 15 years that we have to have for cash to be able to outlay for all that. So that will also help with Halls Creek. Yes, Halls Creek, and different things that came from the regional wastewater. So I mean, there's a lot of capital that we need to spend for. We're just trying to make sure that we don't have to borrow. I mean, we're trying to keep the rate consistent, but try to make sure that we're self-sufficient. And having that money set aside, being able to have interest on that earmarked for the stuff that has to come over the next 15 years. The other part is, on the asset replacement, if there's something that we need to replace, the cost of something that was 30 years ago, right now what we're seeing is what that cost was 30 years ago. Those costs are going to increase year after year. We don't know what that's going to be. So there is some assumptions in there for what we think the cost will be, but the reality is we don't know what the best estimate we have right now is. This is what it's going to cost, 65 million for the next 15 years. But in reality, that could be a very far different number, a very bigger number. That's why we're trying to be consistent with making sure that we have money set aside, earmarked for capital in the future.
Okay, thank you. Merci. Quelqu'un d'autre?
Thank you. Anybody else? I don't see any other question. So I presume that there won't be, you didn't present any rates per se, so there's no increase. The rate stays the same at 210. It's the same since 2016. So it'll be the same one, 210. Okay, I guess I missed that. I didn't see it in the presentation, but thank you for the information. Any other questions? Nobody? Well, thank you so much.
Alors, il n'y a rien comme,
There's nothing like this experience in front of a council to make sure we have the right answers to the questions. And I hope we didn't stress you too much. Not at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Have a good night.
Prochaine présentation de Kodiak Transpo.
And our next presentation will be from Kodiak Transport. Ms. Alain.
In the municipal world, Alain is a very popular name these days.
Bonsoir. Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, councillors, council, and everybody.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm Angela Elaine. I'm the Director of Transit at Kodiak Transpo. So I'm going to go through a relatively brief presentation. I wanted to start out with some good news. This is a graph depicting August 2021 until September 2022 of our regional transit boardings. So as of September, we are definitely have recovered fully from any pandemic impacts that we would have talked about here a year ago. So that's really good news and much faster than we anticipated. And it's not the same story at every transit system across the country, but this region has benefited very much from increased student population, increased newcomers, and also the fuel prices, you'll see later, are hurting us on our budget side, but they are driving more people to utilize public transit as well. These are the numbers here for the city of Dieppe specifically. So this is trending really positively. This is an average of approximately 16,000 boardings a month. So you're on track for at least 192,000 boardings over the next year. We expect these numbers to hold, if not continue to increase incrementally. So as you'll recall, as pandemic restrictions eased, transit services increased gradually. So as you can see from this graph, there's been a progression throughout this time period. As when the demand was really low, we had a lot less service on the road. Because the demand was so low, and as it's increased, we have been increasing our service levels in the region. I'll take a moment here just to note too that we are looking ahead for future improvements as well with your staff. For example, in the short term, because of the increased boardings that we're seeing in September, we're already working on modeling some changes to peak hour routing. So this would be during commuter times on your busiest routes. We're looking at changing the schedules slightly with some adjustments on the time schedules because passengers are having challenges. Our drivers are having challenges. The buses are a lot busier. It's harder for us to keep them on time. So we need to make some adjustments. I'll also note we've been having some driver recruitment challenges. This has been since the summer. We currently have 5 people in training and we're looking for at least 8 more. So there's a lot of demand for drivers right now, as there has been for some time, but we're feeling confident that we'll be able to address this early in the new year, we hope. It is a process. The recruitment process takes time. We have a training program. Most people we're hiring do not have a bus license. So it's a little more investment in their training, but really good people and good customer service outcomes are what we're looking for with these hires. Also, before I get into our operating budget, just highlighting a few projects that we're working on for 2023. So as you know, thank you very much. We just ordered a bus on your behalf. So we're looking forward to getting that by this time next year. We also have plans with all 3 municipalities to look at some solar transit shelters. And if anyone decides to buy them, we'll try to buy them all together to just save on shipping and that type of thing. We're looking at cameras to be added to our buses next year. We have that contract just getting underway now. Annunciators are coming to buses next year. That's another contract we're working on. This will allow automated stop announcements for any passengers with hearing loss or vision loss. Reloadable bus passes. We just announced our new passes that are in effect right now. The monthly passes are more of a plastic type card now instead of paper. They're a little more durable and they're a 30-day card instead of a monthly. So people can use them for whatever 30 days works for them. And the next phase is this reloadable bus pass, which will be next year. This will allow people to not have to go to stores anymore to continually buy passes. They'll be able to add money to their account through their app or on their desktop. And just to make it a bit more convenient, we still will have, of course, all our retail outlets will still sell passes, but for many, they're looking for technological improvements. And as Councillor Langtang knows, our governance committee is working to keep transit rates affordable. So we are not increasing our cash fare next year, but we will be increasing the price of our bus passes by $2. This is pending all the budgetary approval process, of course, with the 3 municipalities. So we have regular meetings, the transit staff with the staff from your municipality. And this is an overview of our Kodiak Transpo complete expenditure budget. So this would be for all 3 communities. I'll just quickly go through this just to make a few points. As I mentioned, 2021 budget at 10.8 million. Sorry, the numbers are a little small, so if I make a mistake on a number, I'll correct it later. I need my glasses, but I think I need 2 pairs. So the 10.8 million for the regional budget in 2021 was smaller than it normally would have been. This is, again, as I mentioned, because of the pandemic impacts. We lost a lot of ridership and we had to cut service back to reduce our expenses. So the 2022 budget, when it was made a year prior, the intent was to have full service back in all 3 municipalities. That took a little longer than we thought. We're still working on that. We're at about 90% right now. And as I mentioned, driver recruitment has slowed it a bit as well. So for 2023, you can see we're at 12.2 million for the 3 communities for total expenses. I may repeat myself on the next slide. The next slide is specific to the city of Dieppe, but just to mention here, the main impact on operating expenses is the price of diesel fuel. I would note we've also experienced some increase in parts for bus parts. We've seen inflation affect the cost of those items. And in 2022, we've had to make a few repairs at our garage. So additionally, this is just focusing on expenses, but on the revenue side, so we have fare box revenue, and of course the investment made by all 3 communities. So the fare box revenue is 2.98 million is what we're forecasting in total for 2023, with the remainder to be offset by investments from all 3 communities. So this slide is specific to budgetary line items for the city of Dieppe. We break it into categories. And this again is showing multi-year, 2023 being the last column. So we have the operational expenses as the first line, diesel fuel is included in there. That's primarily where there's an increase. Right now, we're paying 57% higher than we budgeted last year on diesel. We are saving in other areas because we haven't increased our full service level. So we're saving on salaries, for example, with operators not being fully utilized yet. The next line there is on replacement buses. Then we have bus maintenance, which is direct billed. This is for all repairs for your 3 vehicles. And then we have revenue, 310,000 is what we've budgeted for 2023 for fare box revenue, with a subtotal at the bottom of 826,382. This represents the current service level provided today that we would provide in 2023. So that's an increase of $50,158. And I will pause there and take any questions.
I'll give you the first questions, which I'm sure once it's a question that all 8 others would ask. Et puis c'est à quand? When are we gonna have buses with
electric
buses?
Yes, absolutely.
See, even you had that question.
Yeah, no, that's the natural progression for sure. So we have a study that's underway currently. We've hired a consultant. They go It's an acronym, but it's QTRIC. They are specifically scientists that work only in public transit deployments of technology. And so they have a lot of experience doing these electrification studies in other markets, small markets and larger ones for transit systems in Canada. So we feel quite fortunate. And it's a 5-phase study. They just started the end of August. It's expected to be done in April 2023. And there will be engagement, of course, with your staff as well as Riverview to identify exactly what it's going to entail. But from my perspective, the scope of work is quite comprehensive. It's assessing basically what is needed, what is the range requirements on the bus routes, what's the infrastructure we'll need in our garage to enable charging, what are the operating costs, what are the capital costs, just a full comprehensive plan in order to implement and get going. So we hope, our plan when we present to the Moncton City Council will be to include one electric bus as a pilot project, because this is another thing recommended by many cities, is to do small deployment, because it's quite a change. It'll be a major shift for the transit department to completely replace diesel buses to go to another zero emission energy. So QTRIC will be looking at battery electric first. They're also going to be looking at hydrogen. And additionally, in consideration of the bus you just purchased, which I think is wise to have done, they're also looking at converting new model buses from diesel to battery electric, because there are manufacturers in Canada that are able to do so. So these will be options that we've asked them to present, and they'll help us all make a better plan for the future.
Thank you. Alors, question, Madame Leboutier.
Questions, Councillor Leboutier. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'm just wondering, and I think I have the question last year, and then maybe Luc also could assist, is that when I compare the budget of the Tri-City community, you have an increase of close to 130,000 from the 2022 to 2023. But our budget has an increase of 50%. Like 50,000, that's almost why wouldn't it be standard? Like, why wouldn't we have a 33% increase compared to maybe the regular 18, 20%? Or it's a completely different budget than the Tri-City budget?
No, they're all connected. I'm just wondering though, I don't have anybody here with me from finance, but we have quite a formula that we use to calculate this. So it could be the percentage of service hours each community has identified that they'll be operating, because as that number changes, I know the total cost changes. This is something we're also working on in the next year with staff here at the City of Dieppe and the Town of Riverview. We'd like to simplify our service agreement and specifically our billing formula, so we could easily answer questions when it comes to what will it cost to add a new route. It should be a pretty transparent, simple calculation, and it's transparent, but I wouldn't call it simple at the moment. It's multi-layered. We have all these fixed cost, variable cost anomalies, and the service hours of each community impact the rates. And but I will have to get a more definitive answer for you and have to get back to you, because I'm not sure why the percentages don't match exact. Yeah, but we were, I think, oh. So the bus maintenance is direct billed. So that reduced somewhat, because the actuals are lower this year than we had budgeted for. So in 2022, we budgeted 125, and this year for 2023, we're budgeting 120.
Also, isn't it a difference with the net revenue with now the boxes? It's more precise instead of having a percentage shared? Would that be one of the factors?
Yeah, Angela l'a indiqué, là, il y a une formule de calcul qui est
As
vraiment
Angela indicated, there is a formula that is really not very equitable, and that's what we're trying to change. So as soon as a municipality increases or reduces the hours of service, that can have an influence on the hours of the other municipalities, and that's what we're trying to settle. And that's a part of the answer. But as Mr. Melançon just mentioned, for the formula that we use to calculate revenue in Dieppe, we've lost a little bit of our percentage because currently it's based on what actually comes in with the bus passes and so on. So we know it's exact, but if we increase the revenue with the increase in the rate for next year, the percentage of the total revenue is still not going to change. And it's a mix of all of that. That's why the rates are different. But the budget that you received here today doesn't show any increased service level. So it's a service as it exists today applied in 2023. Now, what you will receive in your council package later on, we've asked, we've made a request to have to we've asked for a change of service in the Dover Lakeburn service, but what you see here it would be with the exact same level of services is offered currently. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Lantin.
Thank you, Councillor Lantin. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. I just have a brief question. The budget for 2022, total expenses, 12,101,000, but projections as of August 31st was 12,960,000. So we should have a total expense level of 12,960,000. But now the increase of fuel cost and other increases, why are we budgeting a lower amount than what is projected to be the final amount for this year?
So in a nutshell, I would say the projection's too high. But this is not a number that I create. I look at the actuals. So when I'm looking at our operation monthly, that's what I'm focused on. It's the 2022 actuals. So yes, we're higher on our diesel budget, but most of it so far has been offset because we're lower on our overall operating expenses because we haven't added all the service back in, and now we can't add it in until we have enough driver capacity to do so. So we are projecting deficit by year end because of diesel fuel. But I think because of what we've put here forward for the 2023 budget, we're basically saying we're too high on the projection for 2022. But that's what was planned in August. There was still hope that we would be able to find enough drivers and put 100% service in place quickly. And it's not practical to do that.
All right.
So I think
it might be low because all the costs going up and fuel still going up. The 2023 budget might be a little low. I don't know. I was just questioning, but that's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pas d'autres questions?
No further questions?
I see no other questions, so thank you very much for your presentation. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank
in
you.
the closing.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just appreciate the business. Thank you very much for having Kodiak Transpo provide your fixed schedule service. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your service. OK, merci beaucoup. Alors, ça nous amène à la dernière présentation de cette soirée, une des plus excitantes, sans aucun doute, Expansion Dieppe.
Oh, this brings us to the next presentation for tonight. Well, it's very interesting, Expansion Dieppe.
ça? Perfect. Bonsoir tout le monde.
Monsieur Godbout,
Good evening,
bonsoir.
everyone. Mr. Goodboo, good evening. How are you doing? Dangerously well, as always. Well, I hope that everything's going well. So before starting, I wanted to recognize the people who are here with me tonight. So my colleague is there with me, and the Secretary Treasurer of our board, Jessica Boutot, who is here. I'd also like to talk about the other members of the board who are before you tonight, Mr. Dallaire, Mr. Melançon, Councillor Thibodeau, Councillor Turgeon's not there tonight. Oh, she is there remotely. All right. Hello, Josie. So I want to say that these people are serving as volunteers. And I don't know how much time we have left, but I could get through this very quickly. So quickly, our development is done over here. So this will let you know what we're doing to try and have a prosperous and welcoming town, and attractive, of course, and to work toward local economic development. We want to be a benchmark organization in Eastern Canada when it comes to economic development. Now, our mission is to work with entrepreneurs, developers, and strategic partners to foster a diversified economy and sustain growth toward India. Our core values: excellence, integrity, inclusion, innovation, and pride. And we have to recognize that the three in the center are the same that as those the municipality has. Our strategic plan. So priority number one is for attracting and stimulating business and investment growth, as well as talent development to be so that our commercial and industrial sectors can grow. Priority two, broadening and promoting the range of services to adapt to the current and future business needs. Priority three, continuing to develop the industrial park, the business park, and the downtown area. Those are the zones that we're working on. Priority four, fostering collaboration and partnerships with the different players, fostering collaboration and partnerships with ecosystem stakeholders. And we'll have to see what that'll mean for our local our local economic development agency, what that will mean with all the changes. And of course, priority five, strengthening financial stability and sustainability while fostering organizational development. And last year, we got a professional development plan for the members of our board of directors. Now, we are doing things as a team and we want to get even better. So to see, you probably see yourselves there. Most of the members of the board on this are nominated by the council and the mayor. So the 9 of the 12 are nominated directly or indirectly based on decisions made around the uh, council's board. Our team now, there have been a few small changes. So first of all, is that in November of last year, we added Sylvain Nadeau as the director of real estate development, and Martin Tremblay after being after replacing Marie-France by interim, and she got the position of communications and marketing officer. And Marie-France, she who's now a young mother, they're soon going to have a second child. So now we are trying to find someone to replace her during uh, her maternity leave. And soon we're preparing to have a succession plan for our veteran, which is Mr. Guy Leger, who will be retiring at the beginning of next year. That will leave a community economic development director that will have to be filled. Now, our zones that we're working on, the development areas, well, if we look here, we start with downtown at the center, and especially with financial affidavits, we were able to work on that, and we intend to continue development in downtown. Now there's business, the industrial park at the west of Dieppe, and then the other one at the east of Dieppe Boulevard. There's a business park that has been giving us a few challenges. We'll talk about that later. And expansion of the aviation sector with a phase one that we see is here, and phase two will come next year with a construction. And then we received some funding during the year for that. The tax base, the next ones will give the results of what has happened. And it's not just our work, this is collaborative work through things that are being done between the town and that other people, other business people can benefit. So we see that a great increase of 3.7 billion, as the Councillor Thibodeau said, and this means a nice increase for about 13.9. Unfortunately, we weren't able to, when it comes to non-residential parts, our residential and non-residential is quite strong. Now, when it comes to building permits, we see that this year we are already at 83.9 million, so another great year, and lots of construction taking place. Unfortunately, if we look at the blue color for residential and golden for non-residential, we see that non-residential isn't that high for now. Residential, on the other hand, is still continuing to grow, and it's good because many of those projects are residential and which help with the tax base. When it comes to investments, as to what we see when it comes to building permits from the private sector. So the first column, we see the actuals for this year and the non-residential for 14 million, and there's residential that I divided into two at 29.4 million, which is single dwellings, and multi-residential for about 40 million. And so we're at about 83.6 million at this time. What does this give us as municipal taxes? If we calculate this right, we see that there will be an increase of 1.4 million for the city. And something that's interesting is that if we look at the residential part at 29 million, which is the double of non-residential, but if we look at how property assessments have gone up, we see that residential is only a third more than the non-residential. So we see why the residential part is very important for the tax base. When it comes to investments that are coming, in the 68.2 million that is there, we didn't put the 29 million of residential, so we're concentrating on the private project. But if we were to add that, we see that the city should get about $100 million worth if everything continues this way. So we see other projects that are underway and that should come into this 68 million as well. For 2023, next year, there are projects on our own land and private land. It becomes to non-residential projects of about 47 million, which should bring to the city about another $800,000 in in taxes, but this is almost non-residential, so the residential parts aren't there. We are showing what we're forecasting for the future. So we aren't we aren't predicting the residential part because that's not part of our expertise. And so if we divide the 47 million, there's about 50 million to the industrial parks, 13.5, which is coming into the business park, another 24 million to the downtown in 2023. And 2024, right now, down the pipeline, we see about 53 million, but we're excluding the residential parts. So that gives an idea of what we see coming down the way. And the revenues are now coming up, sorry. So we now see them in blue. So uh, uh, about 1.2 million for this year. That doesn't include the provincial part. Now, our major accomplishments in a few points for in 2022 in the industrial park, 6 plots are being under discussion. So there's the possibility of working on that with clients. In the business park, 2 lots that with, where there was construction was completed. There's another lot under construction, and 2 lots were sold. At downtown, we have an agreement signed for 1 lot, and we are working on the very last details because with all the services and the rites of passage, it takes a while, but we're hoping to have this finished soon. And as I mentioned, we hired a communication and marketing person, and for aviation, there's going to be funding phase 2, and recently we had our expansion Dieppe banquet here downtown at place 1604 with 360 guests. So we were very happy to see that because some of them were following us quite closely when it comes to that. When it comes to investment opportunities, it's these are things that are still coming down the road that should help the city. We'll have to wait till next year to see a lot of that, but still, we've started renewing permanent signs at the industrial park. We should have 2, but one of them should have gone up on the Friday that we had the storm. Everything had to be delayed for that for all sorts of reasons. We hope it'll happen in the next over the next weeks. For the aviation sector expansion, should be under construction next year. Phase 2B is the transportation part, and the municipal infrastructures are already there, and and for connecting with water to make sure that we have the water we need, and also for future phases. Some land was acquired, and we've decided as to how we will do that to acquire land during the next phases when it comes to the aviation sector. So this is unused land that we want to get, and so we put that number in our budget for development. On Benjamin Street, there's a street extension for $750,000 for the private sector. And if that goes ahead, that is an investment that could take place next year. When it comes to the business park, we have the environmental challenge, and so we set money aside for that, and also for compensation, attenuation to. And so we are having design plans and tenders that have to be rethought, and we'll have to have another $100,000 for a tender at that point. So that's not construction. That's just for the plans and engineering. And of course, the construction part, well, we'll have to get approbation for that, approval, but we won't get that in 2023. So there's no amount or the specific year, but it's on the radar because right now a lot of people are interested in that for our businesses. As finally downtown, we acquired some land. Uh, it's a rather high amount, and this is for capital investments for acquiring land downtown, and also for the Gauvin Island. If there's an expression of interest of $15,000 because we're going to have 10 unit a 10 unit investment, and we're expecting to have that sooner than later. Finally, our application for funding with some very summary numbers that was presented to our board under recommendation of our, and this is what we are showing. So if we go to the bottom line, the one that says request for the town hasn't changed. So it's the third year that we haven't increased our request for the town. Our budget for changes, of course, there are changes on the first line. If you look at the fixed cost, we see that we're at about $107,000, $107,000, and this because immigration has now been given to the town, and of course, there have been professional fees as well that have been given there, and there are salary adjustments. There of about 3% when it comes to cost of living increases, so that's included there. Variable costs, well, there's a 1.3 million approximately. That 1.3, well, there's $550,000 to acquire land as well. There is infrastructure fees uh, of about $500,000 that would be refunded to the city. That would be the highest part. Next line, the main priorities and others, there's an increase of about 145 million approximately. This includes environmental studies that I mentioned earlier for certain zones where there may have to be certain compensation. And finally, when it comes to revenue, here it's in red. We're showing it in reverse, you could say. We saw $704,000 of an increase, and most of that is through selling land, selling lots, and the $501,000 is part of that as well. So that to compensate for that, and when it comes to the line, you see operations and profit. Well, that's perfectly balanced. And then development projects, there was a loss of of 800 over $800,000, and that loss is associated with things I mentioned earlier, in that for some land and some infrastructure, and of course the $500 million that should be coming up. So that means that we're going to ask for 1,115,000, 1,115,000, and the amounts that are given back to either the city or the province when it comes to tax, property tax, debentures, or others, it's about 1 million. And of course, there's the $500,000 that is part of that amount. The rest are just fine little details here and there, increases to their property taxes, as everyone received this year, I believe. So this is it for the presentation. So if you have questions, I would certainly like to try to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I have someone in the back of the room who can help me. Thank you, Mr. Goodboo, for the presentation. And there are already the lights coming up. Mr. Godet, Councilor Godet, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The non-residential over the past 10 years has stayed at about 31%. If we had more land to be sold for non-residential projects, or do we have enough land already? But the percentage is difficult because the more your residential goes up, uh, it's harder for the percentage to follow. If we had more land available and great variety of it, certainly that wouldn't hurt. It's like anything else. The better selection you have to sell, the more the more business people you attract. It's just that residential, I mean, has been going very well for quite a few years. We don't know what the future will give us. But, well, our mandate is concentrated on the non-residential, but I won't hide that we are working on multi-residential or mixed use as well, and that's fine. We have no problem working with on those projects, and as much as possible, even modify them. It comes to the multi-residential for the municipality. That's not a bad thing because of the because they don't take a whole lot of space. Doesn't require a whole lot. You don't need hundreds of meters to extend water services, for example. When it comes, according to the projections, the people in real estate are forecasting a lot of catch up to do when it comes to housing, and we're going to continue at a good speed, a good rhythm, but we don't think that we're going to meet all the needs of all the demand because the market has changed given the demographic changes and with immigration. Now, another problem is there's only a certain capacity of construction. So they don't think we're going to see, but catching up for at least another decade. So I think we can continue to see many years of multi-residential construction. Thank you. Mrs. Leboutil, Councilor Leboutillier. First of all, thank you for your great work and your presentation. I have two questions, mostly for information. On slide 10, we are talking about in 21, 22, we're talking about 1.3 million for tax revenue, or rather it'll come to 69.7 million. How much of that, because we're giving grants, I mean, this is why they come to us as well in the downtown, but what could we estimate that 1.3 million? Are we talking about 2%, 10, 12? That's a very good question because it has to be in our zone for one thing. We in our actuals, and we give our board of directors quarterly what the what has come in. But today I couldn't give you an assessment of that. I don't know if Stéphane might have a different point of view on that, but it would be hard. But this is something we can look at, and we can do it in two different ways. But I would propose to look at the projects already involved, the extent of those projects, but sometimes for what's coming down the road, we may not have enough details about it. So if we try to compare incentives, etc., it's hard to come to compare. Well, maybe I didn't ask my question that way. I wasn't looking for details like that, but I mean, we gave a lot of grants. I mean, what does that represent on our 35 million? Because that's a minimum of our cash flow, just to see if we're looking at that, if there should be adjustments made. Are we looking at that? When it comes to the grants? Oh, we're looking at that for sure. When we analyze projects, when we present them to the board to recommend them to to the council, I mean, those that have incentives downtown and for all of those, all of that land, all of those lots except one belong to the city. Now, if the numbers we're showing is the additional revenue that the project should bring for 1 year. So if you, okay, I mean, I mean, it doesn't cost us anything. It's just that we don't receive it immediately, but we'll have to receive it at some point. And certainly, it's a good strategy. It's just a matter of. I was just curious about that. Now, my other question for the will this be on our internet site? It will. It's the city that decides. I mean, now all the material that is made public it should be there. Otherwise, we would be in camera. Yeah, certainly. And the only slide that was not in what we sent originally is this one because we didn't have there was an error on the other one that we weren't able to correct.
Plus le constat, comme vous avez dit, la façon que vous avez
Okay, but it
présenté.
was more the way you said it. You said, you talked about financing request to somebody and losses, and somebody looks at this and says, oh, it's a loss, and but it's a profit really, and the other revenue, that's a profit as well. It's just they're in red here, so it's just the presentation of it. Yeah, well, that was my point. It was the relationship between the city and ourselves. We are a creation of the city. We're here to help the city generate more revenue on its side. So it doesn't necessarily appear in our books, but it appears in the two entities together. And that's the way the financial statements are presented. We're a part of those total results. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Boudreau. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. My first point is on the downtown area. I'm trying to understand how can we make the downtown area even more dynamic? And are there any empty spaces in the new developments down in the downtown area? Are there a number of empty spaces? No, are there not a number of empty spaces? We were at a weekend at a conference last week, and we're starting to get known. People are starting to hear about us and know us and want to come to Dieppe. And so they're really interested in what we have to offer, especially with the Cadillac Fairview Mall and everything else all around there. And every time somebody asks us is where, our question is where are we going to put them? So the new project at the corner of Champlain and Dumarché streets, there's only one tiny little spot left on the ground floor. And for most of the interested parties, that was too small. So we're trying to identify other opportunities in the municipality to create other commercial spots. So yeah, we're in a good situation. Our vacancy rate is very low for the commercial industrial, and it's the same thing in the industrial park. Sometimes people from New Brunswick or from elsewhere say, they want 40, 50,000, 100,000 square feet, and we tell them, well, let us know in advance. Please give us advance warning. But no, we don't have that kind of space available in the city. Well, how can we attract even more businesses like restaurants or brasseries, pubs in the downtown area? We have Kavok, which is at the other end of town. But when you think of downtown on a Friday night, you want to go out, you want to go have a beer somewhere, and then perhaps walk to get a pizza somewhere. But they're so far one from the other, it's a little complicated. And if you look at the IGA, well, there's kind of a center downtown just with the ice cream shop or the cookie shop. So I'd like to see how we can, or do you have the tools in place to try and attract that type of business to the downtown area? Well, for these businesses to be successful, you have to people will either work or live close by. And for example, at the corner of the corner that I mentioned earlier is good because there are two stories of residences. Other people who lived in the downtown area can go to Tony's or to Archibald, Cafe Archibald or elsewhere. But luckily, with the quality of the restaurant of the Tony's, that's a great for us to say, look at the quality of the restaurant that's there. I mean, that really works. So as the downtown develops and densifies with residencies, I mean, different projects on Champlain Street, that's going to be great for that. And on Acadie Street as well, there are projects underway there. So when chains or different businesses want to come set up, we tell them, yes, this is there. But but we'll tell them, but there's also this project there, and that project is coming up later. So those are tools that we can use to attract new businesses to serve the population. And yeah, on Dieppe Boulevard, well, these are neighborhood businesses in that area, and of course, it's normal that we see that kind of business set up with that kind of development, and that's great. And that'll be two different sectors of the city that are both growing and both dynamic. And so we see things moving, and we see that there's great interest. Thank you. I have a second question on something completely different. We're talking about the housing crisis. It's known everywhere. It's difficult to find workers as well for the construction industry. Do we have the necessary tools to approach construction companies for nonprofit projects, for example, to have more affordable housing? I mean, it's good to have a balance of both in a city in order to be able to meet different needs. So do you have any recommendations to give us, to give council, in order for us to help attract this kind of construction companies? I've talked a lot about with the here with the city, and I think there's a group that is looking at this currently internally, but it's difficult. I mean, up to what point can the municipality act? Um, in the past decades, this is a role that's usually played by the federal and the provincial governments. And unfortunately, some of the projects have been abolished or almost. The amounts of money are not there anymore. And the governments are aware of that something has to be done. But at this point, it's just a question of being ready to see what we can do. And we've been trying to identify different nonprofits for a few years again already. Nonprofits that are already active in our city or in our region. We've already gone knocking on a few doors. It wasn't the most positive responses we got in every case, but as we knock on more doors, we see that more and more people are interested. So there's a lot of work yet to be done working together. We can look at the land that might be available and work on projects with the approval of the city, of course, by working on the different master plans that already exist. But yes, this is something that has to be looked at very, very closely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? I don't see any other lights on. So the brightest light, Mr. Gubu, is yours. Thank you, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.